The distress signal came through the quantum relay at 0347 hours, Terran Standard Time. Captain Sarah Chen was nursing her third cup of coffee in the command center of the UES Defiance when the communications array lit up like a Christmas tree. "Captain," called Lieutenant Rodriguez from the comm station, his voice tight with confusion. "We're receiving a transmission on the emergency frequency. It's not from any human vessel." Chen set down her mug and straightened in her chair. In the 3 years since humanity had made contact with the Galactic Federation, emergency transmissions from alien species had become increasingly common. Most were routine requests for assistance with navigation or minor technical problems. This one felt different. "Put it through," she ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a being that Chen had never seen before. It was humanoid in basic shape but covered in what appeared to be crystalline scales that shifted from blue to purple in the light. Its eyes were enormous, taking up nearly a third of its face, and they were filled with unmistakable terror. "Please," the alien said, its voice trembling through the universal translator. "Anyone who receives this transmission, we beg for your help. We are the Kethtar of the Andorian cluster. Our world is dying. The Vortak have come, and we cannot stop them." The transmission cut to static, then looped back to the beginning. Chen watched it twice more, noting the desperation in the alien's voice, the way its hands shook as it reached toward the camera. "Rodriguez, get me Admiral Harrison on the priority channel," she commanded. "And wake up the senior staff. Looks like we're about to have a long day." Within an hour, the Defiance was part of a 3-ship flotilla heading toward the Andorian cluster at maximum warp. The other vessels in their small fleet were the heavy cruiser Retribution and the destroyer Hammerfall. Chen had served with both captains during the Proxima incident, and she trusted them with her life. Admiral Harrison's face appeared on the screen as they entered hyperspace. The old man looked tired, as he always did these days. The burden of commanding humanity's growing fleet was taking its toll. "Sarah, I'm uploading everything we have on the Kethtar and the Vortak," Harrison said. "The short version is that the Kethtar are a peaceful species, mainly traders and artisans. They've been members of the Galactic Federation for about 200 years. The Vortak." He paused, rubbing his temples. "The Vortak are something else entirely." Chen pulled up the files on her personal display. The Kethtar seemed pleasant enough. Their civilization was built around art, music, and philosophy. They had no military to speak of, relying on Federation peacekeepers for protection. Their world, Kethtar Prime, was a lush garden planet with floating cities connected by bridges of living coral. The Vortak files were much darker. They were a warrior species from the galactic rim, standing nearly 8 feet tall with chitinous exoskeletons and forearms ending in razor-sharp claws. Their society was built around conquest and consumption. They would strip a world of all its resources before moving on to the next target. What made them truly dangerous was their technology. While most Federation species had abandoned warfare in favor of diplomacy, the Vortak had spent centuries perfecting the art of destruction. "They've been quiet for decades," Harrison continued. "The Federation thought they might have finally exhausted themselves fighting each other. Apparently, they were just gathering strength." "What's our mission, Admiral?" Chen asked, though she suspected she already knew. "Officially, you're there to evacuate Federation citizens and provide humanitarian aid." "Unofficially?" Harrison's expression hardened. "The Federation Council has been debating a response for 6 hours. They can't agree on anything stronger than a formal protest. Meanwhile, the Kethtar are dying." Chen nodded grimly. She'd seen this before. The Federation was a wonderful organization for promoting trade and cultural exchange, but when it came to military action, they were paralyzed by committee. Every decision had to be approved by representatives from dozens of species, each with their own agenda. "Understood, sir. We'll do what we can." "Sarah," Harrison said quietly, "the Federation has rules about military intervention. Earth Command has different rules. Use your judgment." The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts. She joined the Earth Defense Force 12 years ago, fresh out of the academy and full of idealism. She'd wanted to explore the galaxy, to meet new species and learn about their cultures. The universe, it turned out, was a more dangerous place than she'd imagined. The Proxima incident had been her first real taste of combat. Pirates had taken over a mining station, holding 300 civilians hostage. The Federation had wanted to negotiate. Earth Command had sent in the Marines. The hostages were freed, but Chen had learned a hard lesson about the difference between human and alien approaches to conflict. Most Federation species had evolved on relatively peaceful worlds. They'd never faced the kind of environmental pressures that had shaped humanity. Earth was what the galaxy called a death world, a planet so hostile that only the most adaptable and aggressive species could survive. Humans had been forged in the crucible of ice ages, natural disasters, and constant warfare. Where other species saw problems to be discussed, humans saw problems to be solved. The journey to the Andorian cluster took 18 hours at maximum warp. Chen used the time to study the tactical situation and prepare her crew. The Defiance was a Thunderbolt-class cruiser, designed for long-range patrol and rapid response. She carried a crew of 400, including a full Marine detachment. Her weapons were primarily human-designed railguns, missile launchers, and the new plasma cannons that Earth's engineers had developed from captured alien technology. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, her tactical officer, was a veteran of the Titan colony conflict. He'd spent the journey analyzing Vorthack ship designs and weapons capabilities. "They're tough," he reported during the final briefing. "Their ships are heavily armored and carry some nasty weapons. But they're also slow and predictable. They rely on brute force rather than finesse." "What about their numbers?" Chen asked. "Based on the long-range sensors, we're looking at approximately 50 Vorthack vessels in the system. Everything from fighters to heavy battleships. They've got the Kethtar completely surrounded." Chen studied the tactical display. It wasn't good odds, 3 human ships against 50 Vorthack vessels. But she'd learned long ago that numbers weren't everything. The key was to hit hard and fast, to use the enemy's assumptions against them. "Commander Walsh," she said, turning to her Marine commander, "I want your people ready for boarding actions. We might need to get creative." Walsh nodded. He was a compact man with steel-gray hair and the kind of scars that came from years of combat. His Marines were the best in the fleet, trained in zero-gravity combat and equipped with the latest in powered armor. "Rodriguez, open a channel to the other ships. I want to brief the other captains on our approach." Captain Morrison of the Retribution and Captain Singh of the Hammerfall appeared on the screen. Both were experienced officers, and Chen could see the same grim determination in their eyes that she felt in her own heart. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen began, "we're about to enter a system where 50 Vorthack ships are systematically destroying an entire civilization. The Federation wants us to evacuate refugees and file a report. I have a different plan." She outlined her strategy quickly. The Vorthack would expect them to run or try to negotiate. They wouldn't expect 3 human ships to attack immediately. The key was to cause maximum damage in the first few minutes, before the enemy could coordinate a response. "It's risky," Morrison admitted. "But the Kethtar don't have time for a cautious approach." "Agreed," Singh added. "My ship is fast and maneuverable. I can draw off some of their fighters while you two hit the big targets." Chen smiled grimly. This was why she loved working with other human crews. No lengthy debates, no committees, just soldiers making the hard decisions that needed to be made. "Dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds, announced the navigation officer. Chen returned to her command chair and activated the ship's intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. We're entering the Andorian system to assist a Federation member world under attack. These people asked for our help, and we're going to give it to them. All departments, report ready status." The responses came back quickly. Engineering was ready. Weapons were ready. Marines were ready. The Defiance was a ship of war, and her crew was eager to prove themselves. "Exiting hyperspace now," called the helmsman. The stars shifted, and suddenly they were in the Andorian system. Chen's breath caught as she saw the devastation on the main screen. Keftar Prime was a beautiful world, or had been. Now, massive fires burned across its surface, and debris from destroyed orbital stations formed a glittering ring around the planet. The Vortak fleet was spread throughout the system, their dark ships moving methodically from target to target. "Sensors are picking up massive casualties," reported the science officer. "Population centers are being systematically destroyed." "And the Vortak?" Chen asked. 53 ships confirmed. They're not even trying to take prisoners. This is genocide." Chen felt a cold rage building in her chest. She'd seen the aftermath of Vortak attacks in the classified files, but witnessing it firsthand was different. These weren't warriors fighting for resources or territory. They were butchers, destroying an entire civilization for the simple pleasure of destruction. "Captain," Rodriguez called out, "we're being hailed by the Vortak flagship." "Put it through." The screen filled with the image of a massive Vortak warrior. Its forearms were spread wide in what Chen recognized as a threat display, and its mandibles clicked menacingly as it spoke. "Small ships of the softskins," it said, its voice a harsh rasp through the translator. "You are in Vortak space now. Flee, or join the Keftar in death." Chen stood slowly, her hand resting on the plasma pistol at her hip. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Defiance. The Keftar are under the protection of the Galactic Federation. Withdraw immediately, or face the consequences." The Vortak's mandibles clicked faster, which the cultural database indicated was laughter. "The Federation of Cowards? They will debate and posture while worlds burn. You are alone, Softskin. 3 ships against our fleet. You cannot win." "You're right," Chen said calmly. "We can't win. But we can make you pay for every life you've taken." She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. "All ships, this is Defiance. Execute Plan Alpha. Show these bastards what happens when you mess with a Federation world." The 3 human ships exploded into action. The Hammerfall accelerated toward the Vortak fighter screen, her point defense systems blazing. The Retribution angled toward the enemy's heavy cruisers, her massive railguns already charging. The Defiance headed straight for the Vortak flagship, her plasma cannons glowing with deadly energy. The Vortak response was immediate but poorly coordinated. They'd been expecting either immediate surrender or a desperate attempt to evacuate refugees. They hadn't expected 3 human ships to attack without warning or hesitation. "Firing railguns," Hayes announced. "Target, Vortak heavy cruiser, bearing 097 Mark IV." The Defiance shuddered as her main guns fired. The electromagnetically accelerated projectiles crossed the distance in seconds, punching through the enemy ship's armor like paper. The Vortak vessel staggered, then exploded in a brilliant flash of light. "First blood to us," Chen said with satisfaction. "Next target." The battle was chaos. The Vortak had superior numbers, but the human ships were faster and more maneuverable. They darted between the enemy formations, hitting hard and moving before the Vortak could respond. The Hammerfall was a blur of motion, her weapons systems picking off enemy fighters with surgical precision. The Retribution had engaged 3 Vortak cruisers and was giving as good as she got, her heavy armor shrugging off enemy fire. But the odds were still overwhelming. For every Vortak ship the humans destroyed, 2 more took its place. The enemy was beginning to coordinate their attacks, and Chen could see that her small fleet wouldn't be able to maintain their advantage much longer. "Captain," Hayes called out, "the Vortak are forming up for a mass assault. They're going to try to overwhelm us with numbers." Chen studied the tactical display. The enemy was regrouping, bringing their heaviest ships to bear. In another few minutes, the human fleet would be caught in a crossfire that no amount of skill could overcome. "Captain Morrison," she said over the calm, "it's time for Plan Beta." "Understood. It's been an honor, Sarah." Chen watched as the Retribution suddenly changed course, heading directly for the Vortak flagship. The massive ship's guns were blazing, cutting through the enemy formation like a sword through silk. But she was taking devastating damage in return, her armor glowing white-hot from repeated hits. "What's Morrison doing?" asked Hayes. Something stupid and heroic, Chen replied. All hands, prepare for ramming speed. We're going to follow the Retribution in and hit the flagship while it's distracted. The Defiance surged forward, her engines pushed beyond their design limits. Around them, the battle raged with increasing intensity. The Vorthack had finally realized that they were facing an enemy that wouldn't retreat or surrender, and they were responding with the full fury of their war fleet. The Retribution was barely holding together as she approached the Vorthack flagship. Her hull was breached in a dozen places, and atmosphere was venting from her wounds. But Morrison's crew kept fighting, their guns never stopping their deadly fire. Morrison to all ships, came the veteran captain's voice over the comm, tell them back home that we didn't go quietly. The Retribution struck the Vorthack flagship at full speed. The collision was visible even from the Defiance's position, a brilliant flash of light that temporarily overwhelmed the sensors. When the glare faded, both ships were gone, leaving only expanding clouds of debris. Jesus, whispered Hayes. They're all dead. Chen felt a moment of grief for Morrison and his crew, but she pushed it aside. This was war, and soldiers died in war. The best way to honor their sacrifice was to make it count. Target the Vorthack command ships, she ordered. Without their flagship, they'll have trouble coordinating. The Defiance and Hammerfall pressed their attack, focusing on the enemy's remaining command vessels. The Vorthack were skilled fighters, but they were also rigid in their tactics. With their command structure disrupted, they began to make mistakes. Singh had positioned the Hammerfall perfectly, using her speed to stay ahead of the enemy's fire while her weapons picked off targets with deadly precision. But even she couldn't avoid the odds forever. A Vorthack battleship caught her in a crossfire, and Chen watched in horror as the destroyer's shields collapsed. Singh, get out of there, she called over the comm. Negative, Defiance. I'm not leaving while there are still Kethtar to save. The Hammerfall was a wounded animal now, her hull breached and her weapons systems failing. But Singh kept fighting, her crew extracting every last shot from their dying ship. They took down 2 more Vorthack vessels before a coordinated attack finally overwhelmed them. Chen was alone now, one human ship against what remained of the Vorthack fleet. The odds were hopeless, but she'd learned long ago that hopeless odds were just another problem to be solved. Captain, Rodriguez said quietly, we're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's the Kethtar. Put it through. The screen showed a group of crystalline beings huddled in what appeared to be a bunker. They were wounded and terrified, but there was something else in their eyes, hope. Captain Chen, said their leader, the same alien who had sent the original distress call. We have watched your battle from our shelters. Your people, they died for us. Strangers from another world, and they died for us. They died because it was the right thing to do, Chen replied. And because someone had to make a stand. The Vorthack are regrouping, the alien continued. They will come for you now with everything they have. But you have given us something we had lost, you have given us hope. If the humans can fight so bravely, perhaps we can find courage as well. Chen was about to respond when Hayes interrupted. Captain, sensors are picking up multiple hyperspace signatures. Something big is coming. The stars rippled, and suddenly the system was filled with new ships. For a moment, Chen thought it might be the Vorthack reinforcements, but then she saw the hull markings. These were Federation vessels, dozens of them, representing nearly every member species. This is Admiral Tar of the Vulcan Science Fleet, came a familiar voice over the comm. Captain Chen, please respond. Admiral, this is Defiance. Good to see you, sir. The Federation Council has been monitoring your actions, Captain. Your direct approach to the situation has caused considerable debate. However, the results speak for themselves. Chen looked around the bridge at her crew. They were battered and exhausted, but they were alive. And more importantly, they had given the Kethtar a chance to survive. With respect, Admiral, the time for debate was over the moment the Vorthack started their attack. These people needed help, and we gave it to them. Indeed. The Council has authorized full military intervention. The Vorthack fleet is to be destroyed, and the survivors will face trial for crimes against sentient beings. The next few hours were a blur of activity. The combined Federation fleet made short work of the remaining Vorthack vessels. The enemy's rigid tactics, so effective against the peaceful Keftar, were useless against the coordinated assault of dozens of ships from multiple species. Chen watched from the Defiance's bridge as the last Vorthack battleship was destroyed. The enemy had fought to the end, refusing all offers of surrender. In a way, she respected that. They were monsters, but they were consistent monsters. Captain, Rodriguez called out, were being hailed by the Keftar government. The screen filled with the image of a crystalline being wearing elaborate robes. This was clearly someone of importance, probably the Keftar equivalent of a president or prime minister. Captain Chen, the being said, I am High Counselor Veftar. I speak for all my people when I say that we are forever in your debt. Your ship and your fallen comrades will be remembered in our histories for all time. Thank you, Counselor. But we were just doing our job. No, Captain. You were doing much more than that. You were showing the galaxy what it means to stand against evil, regardless of the cost. The Federation has many member worlds, but few have the courage to act when action is needed. Chen felt a moment of pride, but also sadness. Morrison and Singh had paid the ultimate price for their courage. Their crews were dead, their ships destroyed. Was it worth it? She looked at the tactical display, where Federation ships were already beginning rescue operations. The Keftar cities were badly damaged, but they could be rebuilt. The people were alive, and that was what mattered. Counselor, she said, my people have a saying, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. Today, we did something. Over the next few days, the full scope of the Vorthack threat became clear. The attack on Keftar Prime had been just the beginning. Intelligence gathered from captured Vorthack ships revealed plans for a massive offensive against the entire Federation. If they hadn't been stopped here, dozens of worlds would have fallen. The Federation Council, embarrassed by their initial inaction, launched a comprehensive investigation into the Vorthack hegemony. What they found was horrifying, evidence of systematic genocide stretching back centuries, entire species wiped out for the crime of being weak. Chen found herself summoned to testify before the council. The massive chamber on the Federation capital world was filled with representatives from hundreds of species, each with their own perspective on the events in the Andorian system. Captain Chen, said the Andorian representative, your actions resulted in the deaths of 2 ship crews and significant damage to Federation property. How do you justify such aggressive action? Chen looked around the chamber, seeing the mixture of admiration and disapproval on the various alien faces. Some species understood the necessity of what she'd done. Others saw it as a dangerous precedent. Counselor, she replied, the Keftar asked for help. They were being systematically exterminated by an enemy that had no interest in negotiation or compromise. Every minute we delayed meant more innocent lives lost. But surely a diplomatic solution could have been found, pressed the Deltan representative. The Vorthack are a sentient species. They have rights. Tell that to the millions of Keftar who would be dead if we'd waited for diplomacy, Chen shot back. Sometimes, Counselor, the only way to stop a bully is to punch them in the face. The debate continued for hours, but Chen could see that opinion was shifting. The evidence of Vorthack atrocities was overwhelming, and even the most pacifistic species were beginning to understand that some enemies couldn't be reasoned with. In the end, the Council passed a resolution condemning the Vorthack hegemony and authorizing military action against any remaining Vorthack forces. It was a precedent that would reshape the Federation's approach to external threats. Chen was awarded the Federation's highest honor, the Order of Galactic Unity, for her actions. But she knew that the real heroes were Morrison, Singh, and their crews, the ones who hadn't lived to see the victory they'd made possible. 6 months later, Chen stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Defiance, watching as the ship approached Keftar Prime. The planet was healing, its cities rebuilt and its people returning to their normal lives. But there were changes. The Keftar had established their own defense force, trained by human military advisors. They would never again be helpless victims. Captain, said Lieutenant Rodriguez, now promoted to commander after his exemplary service during the battle, were receiving a transmission from the surface. Put it through. The screen showed High Counselor Veftar, but he was no longer in his government chambers. Instead, he stood in what appeared to be a vast memorial, its walls covered with the names of those who had died in the Vortak attack. "Captain Chen," he said, "welcome back to our world. We have something to show you." The camera panned across the memorial, revealing 3 separate sections dedicated to the human crews who had died defending Kethtar Prime. The names of Morrison, Singh, and their crews were engraved in crystal, along with the words "Heroes of Two Worlds." "Your people will never be forgotten," Vethtar continued. "And neither will the lesson they taught us. Sometimes, the greatest act of compassion is the willingness to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." Chen felt tears in her eyes as she watched Kethtar children placing flowers at the memorial. These young beings had been saved by the sacrifice of human crews, and they would grow up knowing that sometimes, strangers from distant worlds would risk everything to help them. "Thank you, Counselor," she said quietly. "I know they would be honored." The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts. The galaxy was a vast and often dangerous place, filled with species that had different values and different approaches to conflict. But humanity had found its place in that galaxy, not as conquerors or dominators, but as the ones who would stand up when others could not. The Defiance continued its patrol, ready to respond to the next crisis, the next call for help. Because that was what humans did, they answered when others called, even when the odds were impossible and the cost was high. In the depths of space, radio telescopes on Earth picked up a transmission from the Andorian system. It was a simple message, repeated over and over in the Kethtar language. "Thank you, humans. Thank you for showing us that we are not alone." The message was broadcast to every human colony, every ship, every station. It became a reminder of why humanity had joined the Federation, not for conquest or profit, but to help others and to stand against the darkness that threatened to consume them all. Captain Chen looked out at the stars and smiled. The galaxy was a dangerous place, but it was also full of hope. And as long as humans were willing to answer the call for help, that hope would never die. The Vortak hegemony was broken, its surviving forces scattered to the galactic rim. The Federation had learned valuable lessons about the need for decisive action in the face of true evil. And the Kethtar had survived, their culture and their people preserved for future generations. But the real victory was something more subtle, the knowledge that in a galaxy full of different species and different values, there were still those who would risk everything for strangers. The humans had earned their place not through superior technology or military might, but through their willingness to do what was right, regardless of the cost. As the Defiance jumped to hyperspace, heading toward its next mission, Chen knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy would face other threats, other challenges. But now it knew that when civilizations begged for help, the Deathworlders would answer, not with debate or delay, but with fleet fire and the unbreakable will to protect the innocent. The stars were vast and full of wonders, but they were also full of dangers. And somewhere in the darkness, humanity stood watch, ready to answer the call when it came. Because that was what Deathworlders did, they survived, they protected, and they never, ever gave up. In the end, that was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, not their technology or their weapons, but their absolute refusal to abandon those who needed help. The Kethtar had asked for aid, and the humans had answered with fire and fury, with courage and sacrifice. And they would do it again, whenever and wherever the call came. Because some things were worth fighting for, worth dying for. And in a galaxy full of wonders and terrors, that made all the difference. The message continued to echo through space, a testament to the bond between species and the power of those who refuse to stand aside when evil threatens the innocent. The humans had come when called, and they had brought with them the fire of their home world, the fire that had forged them into the guardians of the galaxy. The conference room aboard the UES Vigilant was packed with representatives from 37 different species. Captain Chen, now promoted to Commodore, sat at the head of the table, her uniform bearing the new insignia of the Federation Rapid Response Force. The organization had been her idea, born from the lessons learned at Kethtar Prime. "The situation in the Belmar system is deteriorating rapidly," reported Commander Tvek, the Vulcan intelligence officer. "The hegemony remnants have established a base on Belmar 7 and are raiding civilian shipping throughout the sector." Chen studied the holographic display showing the Outer Rim system. The Vortak hegemony might have been broken, but its scattered remnants were proving to be almost as dangerous as the original threat. These weren't the disciplined warriors of the main fleet, they were desperate survivors with nothing left to lose. "What about the local defense forces?" asked Captain Morrison, not the Morrison who had died at Kethtar Prime, but his younger brother Marcus, who had requested assignment to the RRF after his brother's death. "The Belmari are primarily a mining species," Tvek replied. "They have no military capability beyond basic system patrol craft. The raiders are using captured Vorthak weapons and armor. The locals are completely outmatched." Chen nodded grimly. This was exactly the kind of situation the RRF had been created to handle. The Federation Council had learned from their mistakes at Kethtar Prime, recognizing that sometimes military action was necessary to protect innocent lives. The RRF was their answer, a multinational force with pre-authorization to respond to threats without waiting for lengthy debates. "What's our force strength?" Chen asked. 12 ships, replied Captain ZH Tar, the Andorian tactical officer. 7 human vessels, 3 Kethtar destroyers, 1 Vulcan science ship, and 1 Tellarite heavy cruiser. We can be in the Belmar system in 18 hours. The presence of Kethtar ships in the fleet was one of the most significant changes since the battle 3 years ago. The crystalline beings had transformed their entire society, embracing a philosophy they called protective strength, the idea that true peace could only be maintained by those willing to fight for it. "Commodore," said Captain Vethmore, the Kethtar squadron leader, "my people have a particular interest in this mission. The Vorthak took everything from us once. We will not allow them to do the same to others." Chen looked around the table at the assembled officers. They represented the best of what the Federation could be, different species working together, each contributing their unique strengths to a common cause. But she also knew that when the shooting started, it would be the humans who would be expected to lead the charge. "All right, people," she said, standing. "We have 18 hours to prepare. I want full tactical assessments, updated intelligence, and contingency plans for civilian evacuation. The Belmari asked for our help, and we're going to give it to them." The meeting broke up, officers heading to their ships to prepare for another battle. Chen remained behind, staring at the tactical display. The Belmar system was a long way from Earth, populated by beings she'd never met. But they were in danger, and that was enough. "Commodore," said a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Admiral Harrison, now in his 70s but still sharp as a plasma blade. He'd come aboard just before the meeting to observe the RRF in action. "Admiral," she replied, standing at attention. "At ease, Sarah. I wanted to talk to you before you head into another potentially dangerous situation." Chen relaxed slightly. Harrison had been her mentor since her academy days, and she trusted his judgment more than anyone else's. "What's on your mind, sir?" "The same thing that's been on my mind for 3 years, Harrison said, walking to the viewport. "We've created something unprecedented here, a truly multinational military force with the authority to act independently. It's everything we hoped for, but it's also something that could easily be misused." "You're worried about mission creep," Chen said. "About the RRF becoming the Federation's hammer, turning every problem into a nail." "Exactly. The Kethtar incident was clear-cut, genocide in progress, with no time for debate. But what about the gray areas? What happens when the RRF is asked to intervene in a civil war, or a territorial dispute between member worlds?" Chen had been wrestling with the same questions. The RRF's mandate was to protect innocent lives and maintain galactic stability, but those goals could sometimes conflict. The power to act without Federation approval was necessary, but it was also dangerous. "We follow the protocols," she said finally. "We stick to our core mission, protecting civilians and responding to clear threats. The moment we start picking sides in political disputes, we lose our legitimacy. And if the Federation Council orders you to do something that violates those principles?" Chen met his gaze steadily. "Then we'll have to make a choice, sir. The same choice we made at Kethtar Prime." Harrison nodded approvingly. "That's what I wanted to hear. The RRF's greatest strength isn't its ships or its weapons, it's the moral clarity of its mission. Don't let politics muddy those waters." The journey to the Belmar system was uneventful, giving Chen time to review the intelligence reports and plan her approach. The Vortak remnants had chosen their base well. Belmar 7 was a remote asteroid with minimal sensor coverage, perfect for launching hit-and-run attacks on merchant vessels. Commodore, called Commander Rodriguez from the communications station, were receiving a transmission from the Belmari government. Put it through. The screen showed a reptilian being with copper-colored scales and large, amber eyes. The Belmari were a peaceful species, known throughout the galaxy for their artistic metalwork and complex philosophical discussions. They were also completely unprepared for the kind of violence the Vortak remnants represented. "Commodore Chen," the alien said, "I am Administrator Kestal of the Belmar Mining Collective. We are honored by your presence, but I must ask, are you certain this is necessary? Perhaps we could negotiate with these raiders, offer them what they want in exchange for leaving us in peace." Chen felt a familiar frustration. The Belmari were good people, but they couldn't grasp the nature of the threat they faced. The Vortak remnants weren't rational actors who could be reasoned with, they were desperate survivors who had embraced nihilistic violence. "Administrator," she said gently, "what the raiders want is to destroy everything you've built. They can't be bought off or negotiated with. The only way to stop them is to remove them from your system. But surely there must be another way. Violence only breeds more violence, and..." "Administrator," Chen interrupted, 3 days ago, the raiders attacked a civilian transport carrying Belmari families. They killed everyone aboard, including children. They recorded the massacre and broadcast it to your government as a warning. These aren't people who can be reasoned with." The Belmari scale shifted to a darker shade, indicating distress. "Yes, we saw the recording. It was horrible. But to respond with more violence is the only thing that will stop them from doing it again," Chen finished. "Administrator, I understand your reluctance. Violence should always be a last resort. But sometimes, it's the only resort that works." The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts. The Belmari's pacifist philosophy was admirable, but it was also naive. They lived in a galaxy where predators like the Vortak remnants existed, and philosophy was useless against plasma cannons. Commodore, called Lieutenant Hayes from the tactical station, were approaching the Belmar system. "Sensors are picking up multiple energy signatures near the asteroid field." "Put it on screen." The main display showed the Belmar system in all its chaotic glory. The star was old and unstable, casting an orange light over the dozen worlds that orbited it. The asteroid field where the raiders had based themselves was a maze of rocks and debris, perfect for hiding ships and launching surprise attacks. "Sensors are detecting at least 15 Vortak vessels," Hayes reported. "Mix of raiders and converted civilian ships. They're scattered throughout the asteroid field, but there's a concentration of signals near the largest asteroid." Chen studied the tactical display. The Vortak remnants had learned from their predecessors' mistakes. Instead of forming up for a direct assault, they were using guerrilla tactics, hiding among the asteroids and forcing the RRF to come to them. "Captain Morrison," she said over the comm, "take your squadron and sweep the outer perimeter. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with before we commit to an attack." "Understood, Commodore. We'll flush them out." The next few hours were a tense game of cat and mouse. The human ships moved through the asteroid field, their sensors probing for hidden enemies while the Vortak remnants watched from concealment. It was a dangerous dance, with both sides trying to gain an advantage before the inevitable battle began. "Contact," called Hayes. 3 raiders, bearing 270 Mark 15. They're moving to intercept Captain Morrison's squadron. Chen watched on the tactical display as the first engagement began. The Vortak raiders were fast and maneuverable, darting between asteroids like angry hornets. But Morrison's crews were experienced, and they had the advantage of superior coordination. "Good shooting," Chen murmured as one of the raiders exploded in a ball of plasma. "Hayes, what's the status of the main concentration?" "Still holding position near the large asteroid. Looks like they're waiting to see how this engagement plays out." The second climax of the story was building. Chen could feel the tension on the bridge as her crew prepared for what was sure to be a difficult battle. The Vortak remnants were desperate, which made them dangerous. They had nothing left to lose, and that made them willing to take risks that more rational enemies would avoid. Commodore, called Commander Rodriguez, were being hailed by the Vorthack base. Put it through. The screen filled with the image of a scarred Vorthack warrior, its armor battered and its eyes filled with hatred. This was clearly one of the survivors from the original Hegemony fleet, someone who had watched his civilization crumble and had nothing left but revenge. Human, the creature snarled, you destroyed our empire, scattered our people to the void. We have nothing left but our hatred for you and all who shelter under your protection. Your empire destroyed itself, Chen replied calmly. We just stopped you from taking innocent people with you. Innocent? The Vorthack's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. There are no innocents in this galaxy. Only predators and prey. You think you are predators, but you are just another species that will eventually fall to someone stronger. Maybe, Chen admitted. But not today, and not to you. The transmission cut off, and Chen turned to her crew. All ships, this is the Vigilant. The Vorthack have made their position clear. We're going to end this, here and now. All squadrons, advance and engage. The RRF fleet moved forward as one, their weapons charging and their shields raised. The Vorthack remnants responded by emerging from their hiding places, their own ships forming a ragged battle line among the asteroids. The battle was fierce and chaotic. Unlike the disciplined formations of the original Hegemony fleet, the remnants fought like wild animals, throwing themselves at the RRF ships with suicidal fury. They had converted civilian vessels into makeshift warships, mounting weapons on mining equipment and cargo haulers. Vorthack Fighter Squadron, bearing 045, called Haze. They're coming in fast. Chen watched as the enemy fighters weaved between asteroids, their weapons blazing. The Keftar destroyers moved to intercept, their crystalline hulls gleaming in the orange light of the system's star. Captain Vethmore, she said over the calm, take your squadron and deal with those fighters. Don't let them get close to the larger ships. Understood, Commodore. For our fallen. The Keftar ships moved with deadly grace, their weapons systems, a hybrid of human and Keftar technology, cutting through the enemy formation. These weren't the peaceful artisans who had been helpless against the original Vorthack invasion. These were warriors forged in the crucible of loss and determination. But the Vorthack remnants had one advantage, they were willing to sacrifice everything for even the smallest victory. Chen watched in horror as one of the raider ships, its hull breached and its crew dying, accelerated toward the Tellarite cruiser Steadfast. Steadfast, evasive maneuvers, she called out. The Tellarite captain, a gruff veteran named Growl, responded immediately. His ship's engines flared as he tried to avoid the kamikaze attack, but the Vorthack vessel was too close. The collision tore through the cruiser's hull, sending both ships spinning into the asteroid field. Damage report. Chen called out. Steadfast is badly damaged but intact, reported Rodriguez. They're venting atmosphere from decks 7 through 12, but their main systems are still online. Chen felt a cold rage building in her chest. The Vorthack remnants weren't just fighting for survival, they were trying to inflict as much damage as possible before they died. They wanted to hurt the galaxy that had rejected them, to make others pay for their own failures. All ships, concentrate fire on the main base, she ordered. I want that asteroid cracked open. The RRF fleet focused their weapons on the largest asteroid, where the Vorthack had established their command center. The combined firepower of 12 ships was devastating, tearing through the rocky surface and exposing the hidden chambers beneath. Commodore, called Haze, massive energy surged from the asteroid. They're powering up some kind of weapon. Chen stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The Vorthack had somehow mounted a capital ship weapon inside the asteroid, turning their base into a massive gun platform. It was insane, but it was also brilliant in its simplicity. All ships, evasive maneuvers. They're about to. The asteroid erupted in a beam of coherent energy that would have done credit to a battleship. The beam caught the Vulcan science vessel Surak squarely amidships, overwhelming its shields and tearing through its hull. The ship broke apart in a shower of sparks and debris. Surak is gone, reported Rodriguez quietly. No survivors. Chen closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of command. Every death was on her shoulders, every sacrifice made in the name of protecting innocent lives. But she couldn't afford to grieve now, not while the battle was still raging. "Captain Morrison," she called out, "take your squadron and hit that weapon from the far side. We need to knock it out before it can fire again." "On it, Commodore." The human ships moved with practiced efficiency, their crews working together with the kind of coordination that only came from months of training and combat experience. They darted between asteroids, using the rocky cover to approach the weapon from its blind spot. Meanwhile, the Keftar destroyers were dealing with the last of the Vorthak fighters, their weapon systems picking off the enemy craft one by one. The crystalline beings had embraced their new role as warriors, but they fought with a discipline and precision that would have impressed their peaceful ancestors. Direct hit on the weapon, called Haze. The asteroid is breaking apart. Chen watched as the Vorthak base crumbled, its hidden chambers exposed to the vacuum of space. But even as their command center was destroyed, the remnants kept fighting, their surviving ships launching desperate attacks against the RRF fleet. "Commodore," said Captain Vethmore over the comm, "we're detecting escape pods from the base. Should we recover them?" Chen hesitated. The Vorthak remnants were her enemies, but they were also sentient beings. Federation law required that prisoners be taken when possible, but these particular enemies had shown no mercy to their victims. Negative, she decided. They made their choice when they started executing civilians. Let them face the consequences. The battle wound down over the next hour, with the surviving Vorthak ships either destroyed or driven off. The RRF fleet regrouped near the shattered asteroid, their crews already beginning damage control and casualty reports. "Final tally," reported Hayes. "All Vorthak vessels destroyed or scattered. We lost the Surik and took heavy damage to the Steadfast. Total casualties, 47 dead, 93 wounded." Chen nodded grimly. It was a victory, but it had come at a cost. The crew of the Surik had died protecting people they'd never met, in a system light years from their home. But their sacrifice had meaning, the Belmari were safe, and the Vorthak remnants' reign of terror in this sector was over. "Commodore," called Rodriguez, "we're receiving a transmission from the Belmari government." "Put it through." Administrator Kestal appeared on the screen, his scales now a bright gold that indicated gratitude and relief. "Commodore Chen, we watched the battle from our monitoring stations. Your people, they fought so bravely. The crew of the Surik, they died for us." "They died doing their duty," Chen replied. "But yes, they died protecting your people. Don't let their sacrifice be in vain." "We won't," Kestal promised. "We've already begun discussions about establishing our own defense force. The Keftar have offered to help train our crews. We will never again be helpless victims." The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts. The galaxy was changing, species that had once relied on others for protection were learning to defend themselves. It was a good thing, but it was also a reminder that the universe was a dangerous place where strength and vigilance were the price of survival. The RRF fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading back to Federation space. But Chen knew that this was just the beginning. The Vorthak remnants were still out there, scattered across the galaxy and nursing their hatred. There would be other battles, other sacrifices, other worlds that would need protection. But that was why the RRF existed, to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them, to be the shield that others could hide behind. It was a heavy burden, but it was also a necessary one. As the stars streaked past the viewport, Chen reflected on how much had changed since that desperate battle at Keftar Prime. The galaxy had learned hard lessons about the cost of inaction, about the need for those willing to fight when others could not. The Federation was stronger now, more united in its purpose. But the greatest change was in humanity itself. They had found their place in the galaxy not as conquerors or rulers, but as guardians. When civilizations begged for help, humans answered with fleet fire and unshakable resolve. It was a role that fit them perfectly, forged as they were in the crucible of a death world that had taught them to never give up, never back down, and never abandon those who needed protection. The stars were vast and full of both wonders and terrors. But somewhere in that darkness, humanity stood watch, ready to answer the call when it came. Because that was what Deathworlders did. They survived, they protected, and they never, ever gave up.